Well, welcome everybody to our first Language Teachers Forum for 2021. And it's very good to be back here at South Bank with an actual live audience, as well as we're having video by Chanel as usual, and Catherine Tominaga is doing our Zoom too, so welcome to the people that are with us on Zoom. Marcel Nust, who was working with me for the last few years, has retired from the MLTAQ executive, and so I'm very happy to introduce Keita Ishii, who's taken over his position. Keita was on our MLTAQ Gold Coast executive. He was the secretary for a year, and he'd put his hand up, and he was the speech contest convener for 2020. But he must have known something, putting his hand up for that massive job, because we never had that speech contest. But he's moved to Brisbane now and is at the QA at Toowong. So he was interested in having a role in MLTAQ again. So he'll be helping with this one. So it's a joint initiative between Griffith University, who's sponsoring the venue, and the MLTAQ. So I have great pleasure in introducing Kirsten Liebchen, who's going to talk about the multi-level Year 7 classroom with a focus on differentiation for tonight. So thank you so much, Kirsten.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to hook this one up. So it really does give me great delight to be able to share this, I think, first session in a while in person with you all. And I am actually also incredibly delighted that I am now a colleague of Keita. And I also work at the Queensland Academy of Science, Math and Technology in their IB program. So I am going to start off by sharing with you my title page, and then leave you to ponder. Thank you. I have to multitask here, so just bear with me. I'm looking at one screen and having to operate the other one. So, oh, thank you so much. All right, then I just need to look at this one. Great. So you can see there are two pictures there, and of course the first one does address quite neatly our issue of whether or not we are dealing with a homogeneous group in our classrooms, and clearly I think our experience tells us that that is very rarely the case, and that certain ability levels and skills cannot be mastered by everyone, and therefore that aspect of differentiation needs to be applied. So I'd like to talk about and share with you my understanding of differentiated teaching and instruction, and I'd like to particularly speak about my experience of multi-level classrooms in Year 7. I draw on my fairly long experience of teaching, of designing the German C2C materials for the Australian curriculum, years prep to 10, and the theoretical reading of Gail Gregory and Carolyn Chapman's book. So I think I may be able to just hold that up for a minute. So any of the theoretical underpinnings that I'm sharing with you today is from this book, and so the differentiator strategy is one size doesn't fit all, and as I said, I think you've also seen it now. So as with clothing, so with lessons, one size does not fit all. One definition of differentiated instruction is that differentiated instruction is to recognise students' varying background, knowledge, readiness, language, areas of strength, preferences in learning, interests, and how emotions, feelings and attitudes affect learning. Our task is it then to react responsively, tap into prior knowledge, and use differentiated strategies and activities to implement this philosophy daily in our classrooms. Possible strategies to use to ascertain prior knowledge could include pre-assessment. So at the beginning of each year of potentially each unit, or when we get a new class, all of our learners do come with varying degrees of prior knowledge, and we are, I guess, challenged at times to use strategies so that they engage learners to stimulate interest in the new topic, content, and content of learning. And here I would like to refer to, I guess, because of my design involvement in the C2C units for German, and I had also the opportunity to be involved with the creation of the Prep to Year 4 Chinese units. The design of all of their those units of work is always based on that very good practice of tapping into prior knowledge, and you will find in all of the units a slideshow that is called Prior Knowledge. So what do students need to learn next, and what strategies should be used to facilitate the learning? I am very much aware that I'm talking to a most delightful cohort of colleagues and people who have made it their passion to teach languages, and therefore all of you draw from a very rich background of strategies and a toolkit that you use in your day-to-day teaching practice. So when we are talking about the planning phase, there is a particular planning model that the book here, the One Size Doesn't Fit All, has as a main, I guess, guide or yardstick. So I will share that with you in a little bit, but if I'm just going to summarize those strategies, the following may apply. So number one, what is the learning experience and the assessment? So considering standards, benchmarks, and essential questions at the very beginning of our planning and developing of the unit that we need to deliver. Identifying the content, and then activating prior learning, and also pre-assessment. So that might be done in a very informal way. At the school I'm currently working at, data and the access to data is very much their focus, and so it's quite data driven, but it allows any newcomer to actually tap into that knowledge and to see where students are in the kind of like the beginning, medium and advanced groupings when we are talking about our students' ability levels. So then number 4 would be acquire. What new information and skills do students need to learn and knowledge they need to acquire? Number 5 would be apply and adjust. So give students the opportunity to practice and become engaged in any of the activities. And then finally, the assessment. And even there are opportunities for us to differentiate. And when we are looking at the very complex and challenging situation we face in many of our schools. That is, we have students enter at various stages, both in terms of school settings, where some start in year 5, others start in year 7. So where the entry point of these students is, means then, of course, consequently, that you have learners that enter your classroom and a multi-level classroom situation presents itself to you. So, yes, it is the next slide. So what I'd like to just show you here is a varying array of strategies that, as I said, I'm most familiar with the C2C units, and there are many different ways of, even in the very first stages of working with students, we can employ, whether that is the kind of like the speed dating or the okay, no worries. No, that's probably fine. So whether that is a kind of like a speed dating, a collection of signature, a kind of like a human bingo, games-based, or even just in terms of scaffolding any new language around the classroom, whether that's through posters or whether that is by collecting ongoing vocabulary lists that have then the students really be focusing on the work that is presently being studied, or a kind of, this is a very neat way of, I guess, as a culminating task, but also as an introductory task. It's called a back-to-back dictation, where one person has the information of every first, third, fifth, and so forth word. The other person sitting at their back has the second, fourth, sixth, and so forth word, and because they are projecting their voices in a different way and the person is sitting behind them, their listening needs to be very much honed, and also it allows them to practice and, of course, master their spelling and accuracy. And the neat part of that activity is that when they come together and collaboratively look at the work, they have the correctly written part in both of their sheets. So I then like to just share a few other little sections here, and that is any of the speaking activities where, again, we provide them opportunities to tap into very easy knowledge. And if, of course, I think forefronting all of this, I would need to acknowledge that everyone is very much sitting in an full curriculum, and the tasks are manifold, and so to find the time to even do what I've been calling the pre-assessment is often only possible in terms of note-taking, maybe at best, and data gathering in a more formalised way in a situation where time would allow for that to occur. I often start, especially in year 7, with actually just a little profile that I ask the students to provide me with in terms of gathering that data at the very onset, where I get them to say how many years, you know, where they've come from, where their previous primary school was, if it was if the entry is year 7, and then of course establish whether they have been exposed to the language, how long, and I also often include the question of whether anyone in their family speaks the language, so that I get a good sense of where initially I can kind of like group them. Just a little aside, at QA SMT we actually have a year even though it's the last year this year, an ab initio program where year 10s start, and they start at the beginning level of a language, and so they are like year 7 students, only they are in year 10. So of course one has to adjust the content to make it a tiny bit more age appropriate. However, there I had the situation that some of the students came from private schools or independent schools, varying schools, some from immersion programs, and I found myself in a situation where I probably had more than just the 3 levels or 3 groupings. So it's quite, I think our major thing is for us to recognise that we do not have the opportunities to cater for all of those learners. So where we are then left to actually place the kind of like the experts with the beginners, or in my case, I had to actually teach to 3 groups simultaneously, just so that I would not lose the ones that had prior knowledge. So the next slide then, not that you can probably see that, but I am going to make this available to the MLTAQ and for the sharing, and that way you can open it up. These are all graded activities, differentiated activities, so that one has, and they are all in English, so you get some idea as to potentially what it is that you can be doing there. I've left it very small, so there's, I think, very little chance of you actually being able to read that. However, so the very first one, for example, is one where the people are talking about, for example, celebrations. And so because we know our students fairly well, fairly quickly, one hopes, you can divide the team, the class, into teams with 4 children in each team, that way allowing already, and if you're planning this, then which we often have to, therefore knowing who we can place with whom. So those kind of like the groupings where we actually really put deliberate thought into where students are being placed. And so we can then allocate, so in this listening activity we would allocate one of the headings to each member of the team, and the headings are size, colour and other adjectives and a noun. So depending on their ability level, we could have therefore students who are at the beginning stage, perhaps give them just the colour. So they need to listen out for that information in the text that we read out in target language, and we can therefore differentiate in that way in terms of content. So as I said, I share this with you. The next slide will be very similar. They are differentiated activities in English, and I will possibly even just, when I share that, attach that as just separate documents, so that you can have a good read of it rather than a minuscule one right now. So I'm going to, so they are all up, there are these, what have we got here? 5 of these graded differentiated activities, and I'd like you to now take the opportunity to actually, we've got a few people, so I'm just going to tap into your prior and not so much prior, but just your knowledge base. And so what I'd like you to do is do a think pair, and then share activity. So what I'd like you to come up with is what kinds of strategies you use in order to work with activities or content or ways of ascertaining where your multi-level classroom is and what works. So I'd like you to, it's probably going to be maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 minutes. We'll see. We've got the advantage of being here in the room. Those
people might like to share some of their ideas via message in the chat.
Yes, that would be good. So it's 5 o'clock now, so I'll just see how we go in 3 or 4 minutes, if that's okay. So we may just do a bit of a reading out first from those of us who are not, those of you who are not in the room, but actually joining us via Zoom.
So I'll just share these. We've got quite a few messages that come in from our online participants. So Maria says, I usually differentiate my learning goals. All of us will be able to, most of us will be able to, some of us will be able to. Talking about as Kirsten was talking about figuring out the variations in students' pre-knowledge and abilities and skills, which Kirsten has spoken about. I usually differentiate my, I've got that one, already said that one, sorry. Flexible seating options for middle school students. Table 1 is independent work, silent, don't require assistance. Table group 2, quiet work with the help of peers, may need some peer assistance. Table group 3, want teacher assistance and collaborative work. Students can move between groups at any stage of the lesson. I only do this every few weeks. At other times I have a seating plan. And then Peter has shared, she has a senpai game for hiragana when learning Japanese hiragana characters. Learning in so hiragana can be an effective way of differentiating in Year 7 when you have students coming from multiple areas. So after a pre-test and after learning a certain number of the hiragana, choose students with good prior knowledge to be the senpai or the senior student. It's a Japanese term for a senior student, more experienced student, I guess, and they take small groups of other students outside and play little snap recognition games, etc., with hiragana cards to support the beginner students. So there's some of the suggestions that have come from our online group. Thank you, everyone.
Great, and I noticed that there was a fair bit of sharing and, or I should say pairing, and now hopefully sharing happening in the room. So is there anyone who would like to share what you have been talking about?
I have one fluent speaker and lots of others who have done primary school. So half my class is primary school French and half my class is beginner French. So quite often I'll get them to do things like reading out or acting out a part or doing something like that. Or we'll do teach vid, which is, so I'll give them a video that's a bit more advanced than what the others are working on. And so they can do that. TeachVid has all sorts of things like a French transcript and an English transcript. You can then turn off the English transcript and listen to it again and then do kind of activities related to that. Or I might give them a text-to-bait activity which has got a story in it that's more advanced than the other kids' stories. So it's got extra vocab or adjectives or whatever in it. Yeah. Anyone else?
Was there any more sharing that we'd like to generate from the room, or no? Okay. One of the things that, and I'd like to thank the person who's just said, you know, they've organised certain table groups where independent learning is happening, and peer tutoring is happening, and then, you know, another one where much more teacher instruction is occurring. So one of the things that is a really good strategy is it involves a fair bit of preparation and time, but once set up, it is a wonderful way of really having students rotate through a number of activities. So it's basically, in German it is called Stationen lernen. So it's a learning by going from one station to the next, and that's normally done with kind of like response sheets that you know, they fill in, and an answer sheet that is provided. It might be a listening station where they have to very quickly go in, and students rotate around so they can choose which of the activities they'd like to start off with. Not everyone starts at the same table, that's the whole idea, but if there are like graded activities, then that obviously also stretches or extends those students who are potentially having come with extensive knowledge and therefore can engage in that. So I hope I've made that. Yeah.
Sorry, just another suggestion has come in via on Wendy, and this is a book that I've used in the past as well. She has used some activities from the Kagan book, Kagan's Cooperative Structures. I don't know if people are familiar with those, but I also highly recommend those. So just to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next section now that I'd like to move into before I start with I guess a summary of what differentiated assessment can look like. Yeah, no, that's fine. Is just so differentiated instruction in a summary, what I've already talked about is we're meeting students where they are, and differentiated instruction is not treating all students the same. So it's based on the premise that the teacher must adjust the learning to give access to the curriculum. That's what it is. And what it is not is based on a premise that the student must adjust to the learning. So it's the other way around. Then what it is done intentionally. The lesson planning is in lesson planning stage. So it's done prior to, not ad hoc. And yes, and what it's not is not done on the spur of the moment. So one of the things that it does encompass is thinking of higher level students first and tiering downwards. We're not catering for the mid-range, but actually really extending and pushing them and challenging them. Otherwise, you know, everyone, I think the chance of our students getting lost may diminish if we are scaffolding and also really, I guess, being the actors that often language teachers are, you know, bring about, you know, support either visually or with gestures or whatever else. Because of course when we as babies and toddlers learned to speak, that was actually how it happened. We would take risks. We would, not consciously, but of course that is what we did. We made many, many errors, and then our parents or our surrounding people would say nose, 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 ears, whatever it was, and you would actually just have that happening to you more or less subconsciously. You would take on those new structures and language and vocabulary. So, so what it is not, just coming over to the other side, is that we are starting with the lowest level student and tiering upwards. So we're going down rather than up. And then modifying the same. Yes, yes, please, because I'm coming to it now. So what differentiated instruction is modifying the same base activity. So the content or the modification, the adjustment happens within the base activity. Everyone should be able to share out at the end of that activity, and what it's not is giving everyone different activities. So that's, I think, because I would imagine that many of you would probably think, well, my day has not a spare minute as it is. How shall I go about it? And that's one of the things that when I mentioned that Stationen lernen, it is a wonderful activity, but unless you have a teacher aide who will sit there and prepare all of that for you, I think it's somewhat aspirational for a normal classroom teacher who finds themselves sometimes with over 10 classes, especially in the primary setting. Now I come to what is here, and that's, thank you. So the final point here is the group formation. The flexible groupings, so sometimes heterogeneous and sometimes homogeneous. I always have problems saying that. That's still a very strong leftover from my German native speaking days. So, and what it's not is fixed grouping. So, of course, everyone, and there is that beautiful fluidity within our classroom and that complete adjustment that happens. It's not just even the groupings in terms of the social skills that sometimes need to be taken into consideration, but also the opportunities that we have in terms of allowing our students to learn from one another or be in the expert groupings. And so this brings me to, I've spent a fair bit of time trying to find a beautiful visual of the jigsaw puzzle reading skill. Does anyone know that particular activity or skill of breaking down? No, I'm just seeing. Okay, so let me attempt to explain this to you, and apologies that I couldn't find it. It is in the C2C materials several times. A lot of the reading tasks use this wonderful strategy. So what happens is that you get a text, say you have 4 paragraphs in that text, mostly say 60% known vocabulary and or 50-50, it doesn't really matter. But it's quite clearly set out that there are 4 sections. You may also just have 4 separate texts already ready. You have home groups and you have expert groups. So say you have a home group of a table group of 4 people, you number them off, 1, 2, 3, 4, and those 1, 2, 3, 4 people with the number will be the expert of that expert group. So number 1s go together, number 2s go together, number 3s, and number 4s. Each of those will have a text. They become the expert in reading, understanding that text. At the end of the activity, all the experts go back to the home group. And when they come back to the home group, they then, hopefully expertly and proficiently, report back to the rest of the group what their section of the text was about. That means that you can access a fairly lengthy text in a relatively short amount of time, because everyone shares one part and everyone also has that opportunity to become or be an expert. And within those expert groups, there might be people who are actual experts or whatever the differentiated level is. So this is one very successful strategy if you want to break down lengthy texts. All right, so let me now move on to the next point, and that is the document again. I doubt very much that you can see anything or make out anything, but this is the scanned page from that book, and it is a planning document, and it has all the ingredients that I previously read out. I think there were 7 of them. I can't even read it from here, and I'm sitting right in front of it. So that planning document, as the other ones, I will attach so that you can make use of it. And yes, I think there were 6 points to it that I initially read out. So I'm going to just take another few minutes because I want you now to think ahead before I come to the wicked problem of assessment and how we come to adjust, align or assess generally when we have that differentiated classroom or multi-level classroom. So I'm going to just give you another 3 to 5 minutes and look forward to those on Zoom and your online comments, and yes, take it away in here.
So this is about assessment.
Yes. All right, let's just hear from those both online as well as in the room. So there, I could hear some engaged conversation. So again, I think Catherine, if you wouldn't mind starting off.
All right. So, thank you, everyone. We've got Rachel has said scaffold the assessment task. I like to have the scaffolding documents available to all students, and the expert students in the room can elect to use them if they like. Peter says it's definitely easier with open-ended productive tasks like writing and speaking, where students can do what they are capable of and still achieve. To be honest though, I'm not sure about how to differentiate listening and reading assessment tasks other than having a range of questions from easier to harder. So good question there for us, thank you. Rachel says bump-it up walls are a great way to show how to improve a response to an assessment task also. As a class, review a lower response, identify where the response could be improved and how to get there, then review a higher response again with some points which could be improved, and then the highest level response. Break it down so that students understand its achievability. Display the 3 levels of the task somewhere in the room with annotations for students to view at any time. The skill of listening and responding is probably one of the harder skill areas for students to revise. If it's your voice in the exam, have practice listening tasks available for students to listen to with the transcript. Answers, reducing the amount they have to listen to. Read is an option, but this is then an adjusted assessment task, and at least for listening would have to be done in a room at a time separate to the class. Thank you.
Yes.
Round of applause for our online people. Thank you.
Wonderful. What has happened in the room? What kind of sharing was going on?
There's a couple of things. Some of the recent research is saying that for like your comprehensible input, where you've got, say, your 2 texts, the amount of what is comprehensible needs to be sort of much higher than we're used to. So, I mean, one figure that I've seen is like 95%, which seems a bit much, but certainly the bulk of the text that the kids are looking at or hearing needs to be much higher, so that they got the idea, they can understand a fair amount, and then they can go that step further in working out what it is they don't know. And the other point is that, again, it's a lot of research in terms of particularly how memory works, and get it out of your working memory to long-term memory. It's all based on listening. You've got to understand what you're hearing and then being able to say it so you understand what's happening, and then you can work on understanding, for example, the grammar or the rules and so on. There's a book called Memory, What Language Teachers Need to Know About Teaching Language, published this year by Gianfranco Conti and Steve Smith, which I'm still working through. But it goes on, and they're pulling together a lot of research from other researchers and so on. But that is, well, it's certainly pointing me in a different direction than sort of way back when I used to teach.
Anything from the lower end of the table there. Amanda?
Sometimes the amount of preparation time you give can vary. You always use vary, you're not different. You're just a little bit varied on the topic. Or I did write down that the topic can vary. So you might have some that are very high level. The types of things that they can deal with, the types of topics they can deal with. If you were doing environment or you were doing politics or something like that. They can vary, those topics can be adjusted slightly. Inclusion of cultural aspects. So someone who's been exposed to the German language for a long time probably could put in a few more cultural things into a restaurant dialogue. They know the types of things that happen in real life, where someone who hasn't been there would probably learn something from the friend that knows a bit about that and has included that. Even the types of sentence structures that you could expect can vary. Someone with the higher level might have more connectives, where somebody else will be able to get across what they want to say, but in simple sentences. Our young people who are newer to the language, they hopefully will notice patterns. And they'll be able to explain, I can see a pattern there in that verb, where someone who is at a higher level will be able to probably describe what's happening there. When I'm talking in first person, the ending is an E. When I'm talking about he, she, or it, the ending is a T. And things, they'll be able to explain that a little bit more in year 7. Did that help?
Thank you for your contributions. I would like to show you again a little bit. Yeah, I don't know either. Okay, so does it come up there? No, it's all good. All right. So if you wouldn't mind just going on with the slideshow. So this was our stepping into, and the next slide should bring up some of my, does it go? Next slide. There we go. That's wonderful. No? Yep, that's great. Okay, so generally speaking, you can have access to the C2C materials via OneSchool, the Learning Place, and also on Scootle. Whether or not the work that was done and has actually been published, I'm not quite sure. It may or may not have happened after the project came to a more or less close. But what my team and I had done across all of the 6 languages was we had adjusted for the year 7 entry the assessment tasks. So what I'd like to show you is one that was written in the years prep to year 10 sequence, and then that was written and adjusted for the year 7 entry to year 10 sequence. Those of you who've worked with C2C units in languages may be aware that our brief and the funding that was given to writing the materials for C2C was for prep to year 10, which of course in a futuristic and aspirational society may actually occur, and people, students start in prep, stick with one language and go right up to year 10. I have not seen a school where that is actually where I have come across a student who has done that from prep to year 10. However, the briefing of creating a year 7 entry unit was later pushed through, thankfully, and an adjustment in terms of the units can be done, and the beauty of those is, of course, that all of those materials that we produced are either slideshows or Word documents, so you can take out or put in whatever you want and run with it. So if you are looking now at that slide on the screen, you will see that within it you have two comparing views of differentiated assessment. So this is an assessment task to cater for the Year 7 entry, as opposed to the other years where prior knowledge was much more a assumed state of being. So you can see that, and if I may just go, what is it? Is it this one? Oh, sorry, it's over there. Let me not touch your computer. So in the first one, the prep to Year 10 sequence, the students were exposed to 3 different texts. Catherine, can you just go back one again? Sorry. So you can see there was a postcard with a fairly extensive written text, and then there was a text message in the next one, and that text message on the phone was also relatively lengthy. In the Year 7 entry sequence, you will see that there was only, if we now just step back one, thank you, there was only one phone message. That was all there was. And in that reading passage, so the original was 2 texts, and the 7 entry was just the one on the phone. Okay, and you can, those materials, by the way, can also be edited. So we just went into, it's a text box over that sits over that mobile phone. And if you now go, next slide please, you will also see again juxtaposed or compared next to each other, you will see that the amount of questions in the tables that was required was also adjusted and amended. Thank you. So that's the part that goes on. So you can see that that was quite shortened and tweaked for the Year 7's entry unit. So again, this, for those of you who have been using, I know that not all schools need to, nor do they, use C2C materials, but if you run with it, then what you would be using is that guide to making judgments, and that's what you see here. There you can also see that different information was pasted into those sections here for what needed to be changed and aligned. Thank you. I think here I have just given you a little bit of a summary of achievement standards, and this is again I won't talk at length to it because I don't know, but this one how many of you are using it. So this slide shows the Japanese achievement standard, and that comes from the Prep to Year 10 2 band, and it describes what students are expected to know and be able to do at the end of Year 2. So that's the emphasis is at the end of Year 2. And there is a common structure in the achievement standards of all languages, and that's the first paragraph is about the skill of communicating. You probably know there are 2 strands, and the second paragraph describes the knowledge and understanding of language and culture that students apply when communicating. So specific language examples are from the elaborations and are therefore indicative only, and so you use the achievement standards in order to again give an opportunity to adjust and align. I had put in it's your turn to discuss, but I think we have done that previously, so I might just skip over, and the next ones are just really it was more like a thought-provoking way, and that is something that I do just want you to have 1 or 2 minutes of really just thinking about it. How do you use data in your school, in your classrooms? How do you collect it? What is your ability to access any data? Do you self-generate it? Is it just done quite incidentally, or is it, like in Keita and my situation, done quite formally, and we have lots of it? So just 2 minutes, very quick feedback on that one by everyone, please. Any feedback in terms of how you are able to access data or how you use it once, if you are able to?
Through one school, like I'm from New South Wales, so for me it was my first experience with one school, at the school that I'm teaching at now, and it's got like a comprehensive list of all the assessments that kids undergo. But personally, what I've always liked using is Microsoft.
Sorry, if you don't mind, can I just make a brief comment?
Yes, just hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry, we've got somebody in the room talking. Sorry. Oh. Sorry.
Sorry, do you mind if I make a brief comment?
Sorry, Nathan. Just somebody in the room is talking at the moment. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
No, you're sorry. I should bring in this closer. That's my fault.
No, I'm sorry. I'm almost done.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh no, I was just going to say I love Microsoft Forms because I like to keep everything in one spot digitally, and because we use Teams, it's easy just to do through there. It's one-stop shop really, and yeah. But beyond that, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Nathan?
Oh, Nathan.
Yeah, so I just think like this is kind of very helpful because you know, and even in the I guess context of the Australian curriculum review, heads of department will be able to analyse data across multiple different subjects much more easily. I think. I think we collect I guess a brief comment. We collect a lot of data, but I don't think a lot of people understand it or use it very well. I think this presentation is extremely helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I think I might actually, I've just very quickly grabbed over there and took control of the screen ever so briefly. Yes, I've just displayed the 3-level documents that are there, and I was sharing with Catherine that because of the nature of the Prep to 10 pathway and the materials that were designed, you more or less, when you look at any of the resources, you have to think that when you look at Year 9 and Year 10 resources, in actual fact, they are geared to our students as if they are Year 11 and Year 12 students. So when you look at those resources, you can use them for the Year 10 or 11 or 12 students. That's really where the pitch would be. So it's not likely that when you're looking at Year 9 and 10 in C2C materials, that's actually our understanding of Year 9 and 10, because they were designed from a student, imaginary student, I may add, that would be my take on it, who would have come through from prep all the way to Year 10, and then that level would be achievable. So that's just my little thing, and if you just click through, there are some other things that you will find in the PowerPoint when I give it to you, and that's my thank you for listening and allowing me to share.
Well, thanks very much, Kirsten. That's great. The focus was on Year 7, but of course we can extrapolate out to lots of other levels. So I think we've got lots of ideas for all the levels that we're teaching there. I didn't mention that you're from QA SMT, the same as Keita, and I remember at the first Language Teachers Forum, which is about 10 years ago now, I think you were one of the people at the very first forum, so it's great to have you speaking again today. And thanks for the others that have come in the room. It's good to see so many people back here again, and plus all the people that are on line today. And when Kirsten gives me the PowerPoint and the other documents, I'll be able to send those out to the same mailing list, which is wherever you saw the idea that this thing was on today, you'll be able to get that too. And I'll be able to tell you at that point where the video is, if you want to watch the video as well. Our next forums The next one's the 10th of June, so a month away, with Jane Mule, also from QA SMT. She hasn't decided on the topic yet, but then Selena McCluskey from Robina State High School is coming in August to talk about developing speaking skills for senior students. We still have October and November free, so if anyone's got some good ideas, or you know some teachers that have got some good ideas, we're still looking for people for the October and November ones. The people that come in person, or the people that participate in Zoom, we have your names in a list, so you can use that for Queensland College of Teachers, so putting down, you know, recording the PD that you've got. We don't give certificates out exactly, but if QCOT ever asks, I've got records of everyone that came to every language teachers forum, so that we can say whether you were here or not. So I'd like to introduce Kieran Greenhow now. He's the Account and Business Development Manager from GET Travel, and he's been kind enough to provide the afternoon tea for the people that were in the room. We had really nice donuts and coffee, so if you thought whether you might like to come into South Bank, yeah, we have some nice refreshments, and Kieran's going to tell you a little bit about what he can offer you, or will be able to offer you, maybe in the future. So,
good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Lee, for this opportunity to address the association. My name is Kieran Greenhow. I'm the manager there at GET Educational Tours, based here in Queensland. The head office is down in Melbourne, but I work from home and available to come out to your schools and talk to you about potential itineraries. We arrange domestic and international tours, and you being language teachers, I've brought some brochures today of the different destinations that we arrange trips to. And you can also, for those that are online, can look at our website and download our latest brochure from our website. I think a link was sent out by Lee the other day, so please take a look at that. For accommodation-wise overseas, we can arrange hotel stays, but as well homestay, so they can get that cultural experience as well. It's nothing better than being immersed in the language when they're overseas travelling. Yes, there is a pandemic, a global pandemic. I'm well aware of that. But the media, in the media recently, they've mentioned that probably from mid next year, hopefully the rollout of the vaccines will be at a stage where we'll be able to travel again. So that's just over a year from now, which is usually what you'd be looking at to plan trips anyway, usually a year out before you start planning your international trips. So I've got my business cards here today, but also in that link there was information on how to contact us. If you have some time afterwards, please do come and talk to me, take down your details. I'm happy to come out to your school, give you more information. We do domestic touring as well, so if you're not doing something international but another teacher in your school is looking to do something domestic, we can arrange trips down to Canberra, Melbourne, to Central Australia, Tasmania, Sydney, etc. I think that's about it. Well, just my background as well, I do have a language teaching background. I taught English for 7 years in Japan, and I took trips of my Japanese students to Australia and to Canada, so I know your pain. I understand what it's all about, taking large groups, small and large groups, overseas. And I also worked inbound in a Japanese company in Cairns, and we're doing up to 10,000 kids a year. So we've done bulk tours as well as small numbers as well. So yeah, any inquiry at all, please do reach out anytime. Thank you so much for your time.